I was driving alone just after midnight in early November, coming back from a warehouse job that ran late because a shipment arrived hours behind schedule. I had taken the work because money was tight and the night shift paid a little more. The route home usually followed the interstate, but a wreck earlier that evening had shut it down. My phone rerouted me through back roads I barely knew, narrow stretches of pavement that cut through farmland and wooded areas where houses sat far apart and streetlights did not exist. The farther I drove, the darker it became. My headlights felt weak against the black around me. The road dipped and curved without warning, bordered by leafless trees and low fences that appeared and vanished in the beam. I kept my speed low because deer were common out there, and because the road surface looked uneven, patched in places and broken in others. Every mile marker felt like progress measured too slowly. I passed a closed gas station with the pumps wrapped in yellow tape, the building dark except for a single flickering light inside that looked like it had been left on by mistake. I checked my fuel gauge and felt a brief spike of worry, then pushed it aside when I saw I still had over a quarter tank. There was no cell service. The phone screen showed nothing but the time and a spinning icon where the signal bars should have been. The road narrowed further, losing its center line. My tires hummed louder on the rough asphalt. I noticed fresh gravel scattered across the surface, like a recent repair that had not been finished. That was when I saw the truck. It sat pulled off on the right shoulder, angled slightly toward the ditch. Its hazard lights were off. The hood was closed. It was an older pickup, dark-colored, with mud caked along the lower panels. I slowed out of habit, scanning for movement. There was none. No driver standing nearby, no interior light, no open door. It looked abandoned, but too clean to have been there long. I passed it and continued on, telling myself it was nothing. People broke down all the time. Still, I checked my mirrors more than once, watching the empty road behind me. About 5 minutes later, I rounded a bend and saw another truck ahead. For a moment, my brain refused to place it. Then I realized it was the same one. It was parked again on the right shoulder, positioned almost the same way, angled toward the ditch. The mud pattern looked identical. The bed liner had a long scratch down the left side that caught the light as I passed. My chest tightened. I checked the time. Not enough time had passed for someone to leapfrog me without speeding hard, and I would have seen headlights. I told myself there were two similar trucks. It was rural country. That explanation felt thin, but I held on to it and kept driving. The road climbed into thicker woods. Trees pressed closer to the pavement, their branches forming a loose tunnel overhead. The air felt colder even inside the car. My breath fogged the windshield near the edges. I turned the defroster higher and focused on the road. Then I saw it again. The same truck, same mud, same scratch, now parked on the left side of the road. This time the driver's door was open. The interior light glowed weakly, illuminating an empty seat. No movement, no person. Just the open door, swinging slightly as if it had been left that way recently. My heart rate jumped. I did not slow down. I did not look away from the road until it was behind me. My hands felt tight on the steering wheel, fingers stiff. I tried to think through what I was seeing. Someone could be messing with me. Someone could be moving the truck ahead using side roads. That required effort and planning. It required knowing exactly where I would be. I considered turning around, but the road was narrow with no clear place to do it. The thought of stopping felt worse than continuing. I kept going. The woods thinned out and gave way to open fields again. Moonlight reflected off low clouds, giving the landscape a dull gray glow. I could see farther now, long stretches of road ahead with no curves. That should have helped. It did not. The truck was parked dead center in the road. I slowed fast, tires crunching on gravel. I stopped several car lengths back, my headlights flooding the rear gate. The truck was empty. No driver, no lights, no engine noise. It blocked both lanes completely. I sat there, breathing shallow, listening. The night was silent except for my engine idling and the faint ticking of cooling metal from somewhere up ahead. I scanned the fields, the tree line, the ditches. Nothing moved. I thought about reversing, about getting out, about honking. None of those options felt right. I waited, hoping something would change, that the truck would start. that someone would appear. Nothing happened. After a minute that felt much longer, I eased the car forward. I angled toward the right edge of the road where the shoulder dipped into grass. I did not want to get stuck, but I needed to get around it. The space looked just wide enough. As I crept past, close enough to see dirt packed into the tread of the tires, I noticed something new. The truck's rear window had a piece of cardboard taped inside, facing backward. On it, written in thick black marker, was a single word: turn. I did not stop. I did not look again. I cleared the truck and pressed the accelerator harder than I had all night. The road ahead stretched on, empty. My pulse pounded in my ears. I kept checking the mirrors, expecting to see headlights, expecting to see the truck behind me. There was nothing. Several miles passed without incident. I reached a paved intersection with a highway sign I recognized. Relief washed over me so hard my hands started to shake. I turned onto the highway and drove until I reached the next town, where lights and buildings made the night feel normal again. I pulled into a 24-hour grocery store parking lot and sat there for a long time before getting out of the car. My legs felt weak. Inside, under bright lights, I bought a bottle of water I did not need, just to have a reason to be there. The next day, after some sleep, I searched local news and traffic reports. I found a short article buried on a county website. It mentioned an arrest made the previous night after a series of complaints from drivers on rural roads. A man had been using his pickup truck to block roads and scare motorists, moving it between access points and farm lanes, trying to force people to stop so he could rob them. He had been caught after someone managed to slip past and reach a main road. The article included a photo of the truck. The mud, the scratch, the faded paint. It was the same one. I still take night drives sometimes, but I never follow detours without thinking twice. When the road gets too empty, when something feels placed instead of random, I trust that feeling now. That night taught me that fear does not need anything unreal to be powerful. It only needs someone willing to wait in the dark and a road with no witnesses. We were driving home from a funeral in Ohio in early 2022, the kind of winter night where the cold had already done its damage and then backed off, leaving everything wet and dark. The snow along the shoulders was half gone, crushed into gray banks by plows and traffic. What stayed on the road had melted into a thin sheen that reflected headlights like black glass. It was around 1:15 in the morning when we left, quiet and hollow. Both of us drained in a way sleep does not fix. The funeral had been for a relative we were not close to, but the day still took something out of me. Long conversations, old faces, the smell of flowers trapped indoors. By the time we got in the car, my body felt heavy. My brother settled into the passenger seat and fell asleep within minutes. His breathing evened out, slow and deep, the kind that comes from exhaustion instead of comfort. I stayed alert by habit. I kept both hands on the wheel, eyes moving between the road and the mirrors. The highway had thinned into a two-lane state road bordered by open fields and scattered farms. No traffic came from either direction. The world outside the windshield felt empty, stripped down to fence lines, telephone poles, and the narrow tunnel of my headlights. The first time I passed the barn, I noticed it only because it leaned wrong. It sat back from the road on the right side, a wide structure with a collapsed roof that dipped inward like a broken spine. Snow clung to the beams still standing, bright against the dark wood. One wall had fallen out, leaving a jagged opening that swallowed light instead of reflecting it. I remember thinking it looked abandoned for a long time, the kind of place kids would explore and get hurt. I drove on without slowing. A mile or two passed. The road stayed straight, bordered by fields that faded into shadow beyond the reach of the headlights. I watched the center line glide under the car, steady and hypnotic. Then the barn appeared again. Same side of the road, same angle, same broken roofline, the same way the headlights hit the snow piled against its base. I felt a flicker of confusion, brief and dismissible. Rural areas reuse structures. Many barns look alike. I assumed I had mistaken one for another. I kept going. The road did not curve. I did not turn off. No intersections passed that I could recall. The landscape stayed flat and open, dotted with bare trees and low fences. The radio was off. The only sound was the tires whispering over wet pavement and my brother's breathing. When the barn appeared a third time, my stomach tightened. It came into view at the same distance, emerging from the dark exactly where I expected it to be. The broken roof caught the light the same way. The shape was identical. I slowed slightly, my foot easing off the gas without conscious thought. I watched it pass, counting fence posts, noting the position of a utility pole near the driveway. I told myself it was fatigue. Long days play tricks on memory. The brain fills gaps with patterns. Still, I felt the need to anchor the moment, so I decided to count. The fourth time, I whispered the number under my breath. The fifth time, I checked the odometer, then watched the road signs for mile markers. None appeared. The road felt longer than it should have been, stretched thin by darkness and wet asphalt. My eyes burned, but I was not nodding off. I felt sharp, focused, almost too alert. The sixth time, my heart rate picked up. My grip on the wheel tightened. The barn slid past again, unchanged, unmoved by time or distance. The fields around it looked the same too, flat and open, with no new landmarks to separate one stretch from another. By the seventh time, fear settled in fully, not sudden or loud, but dense and cold. I knew I had not turned around. I knew I had not looped back. The road behind me stayed straight in the mirror, disappearing into darkness without bends or branches. Snowbanks and fence lines continued forward and back with no variation. I was moving, but it felt like the world outside the car had stalled. I reached over and shook my brother awake. He stirred, confused, eyes unfocused. I told him about the barn, about how many times I had passed it. I expected concern, maybe disbelief. Instead, his face tightened with something like irritation mixed with exhaustion. He told me we had already passed that area hours ago, long before he fell asleep. According to him, we were miles beyond it, close to a junction I had not yet seen. That did not line up with anything I was seeing. I looked back to the road. The barn was gone. The fields looked different now, broken by tree lines and distant farmhouses. A reflective sign appeared ahead, warning of a curve. I felt a rush of relief so strong it left me lightheaded. We drove the rest of the way without incident. Traffic increased as we got closer to town. Streetlights replaced darkness. My brother stayed awake, quiet, watching the road with me. Neither of us brought the barn up again. Days later, after some sleep and distance, I pulled the dash camera footage from the drive. I wanted to see it with my eyes, not memory. I expected confusion or missing footage or some glitch that would match how the night felt. The video showed the barn once. Just once. It appeared briefly on the right side of the frame. Roof collapsed, snow bright under the headlights. Then it passed and never returned. The timestamp rolled forward without interruption. No loops, no gaps, no repetition. I watched the footage carefully, slowing it down, scanning the edges of the frame. The road ahead stayed straight. The landscape changed gradually, exactly as it should have. Nothing suggested we were stuck or circling. The explanation came together slowly, piece by piece, uncomfortable but solid. The road we took ran through an area dense with old farm structures. Many barns there were built from the same plans decades ago, using the same materials, left to decay at similar rates. At night, with snow reflecting light and fields blending together, the differences between them vanished. My tired mind latched onto one strong image and reused it, overwriting subtle changes with repetition. Fatigue played a larger role than I wanted to admit. Even without falling asleep, the brain can slip into brief lapses where perception fragments and reconnects out of order. Those moments can stretch seconds into something longer, or compress miles into something that feels stalled. The slick road demanded attention, pulling focus forward and narrowing awareness of side details. The dash camera had a fixed field of view. It caught what was directly ahead and to the side within a limited range. My eyes, scanning wider and reacting to contrast, picked up shapes the camera did not frame the same way. What felt like the same barn may have been several structures blurred into one memory by stress and grief. My brother's sense of time was shaped by sleep. He lost track of distance and duration while unconscious, waking into a road that looked similar enough to what he remembered earlier to convince him we were farther along than we were. None of it required anything beyond human limits and winter roads. Still, when I think back on that night, what stays with me is not the footage or the logic. It is the certainty I felt behind the wheel, the deep conviction that I was passing the same place again and again without explanation. The way the barn seemed to wait for me, unchanged, until I noticed it too clearly to ignore. I trust the camera. I trust the reasons. But I also remember how real it felt to be moving forward while staying in the same place, and how long that stretch of road felt before it finally let me go. I left Yakima after midnight with my clothes still smelling like apples and cold metal. The warehouse lights had burned into my eyes after the double shift, and the ringing of forklifts was still sitting behind my ears. My hands felt thick on the steering wheel. I did not want to see another cruiser. I had been waved through twice that week already, and I knew my taillight flickered when I hit bumps. That was enough reason to avoid the main road. Old Vantage Highway cut east through the hills and ran quiet at night. I had driven it once during the day years earlier. I remembered it being empty and straight enough to keep moving. Late October had stripped the land down to brown and gray. The air was dry and sharp. I cracked the window to stay awake and let the cold slap my face. The road rolled out ahead in a narrow strip, my headlights eating it 10 yards at a time. The hills on both sides rose low and uneven, with dead grass flattened by wind. There were pull-offs that looked forgotten, patches of gravel where tires had once stopped and never returned. The reflectors were old and dull. Some leaned away from the road like they were tired. There was no signal almost right away. My phone dropped to nothing, then went black when I locked it. The dash clock glowed steady. The gas gauge sat a little under half. I did the math in my head and felt fine about it. The engine sounded normal. The tires hummed on rough pavement. Everything felt ordinary in that way that makes you stop checking. Around mile marker 12, the land opened a bit and the road straightened. My headlights swept over a broken fence on the right, the wire sagging between warped posts. A section had collapsed inward, bent low to the ground. Caught my attention because it looked recent, like something heavy had leaned through it. I passed it and kept going. The fence fell behind me, swallowed by dark. 10 minutes later, I saw it again. The same bend in the wire. The same posts, one split at the top. The same pale rock sitting near the base like a marker. My first thought was that I had missed a turn and looped back without realizing it. I checked the road behind me in the mirror. No headlights, no dust. I had not turned around. I had not slowed enough to miss anything. My hands tightened without me meaning to. I drove on and told myself there were 2 fences like that out here. Ranch land stretches and repeats. At night, everything looks alike. The road curved gently, then dipped. My headlights reached farther than they should have, catching shapes well off the shoulder. At first I thought they were shrubs. Then I saw height. The forms stood upright, taller than deer, spaced apart, not moving. They did not reflect light like eyes. They took the light and held it flat. When I slowed, the shapes did not change. They stayed where they were, fixed against the slope. When I sped up, they slid out of view. I kept my foot steady. The gas gauge dropped a hair. I noticed it because it should not have. The road was mostly level. I pressed the accelerator lightly and listened to the engine. It sounded strained, like it was pulling more weight than usual. I eased off and the gauge dipped again, then bounced. I told myself the sensor was old. Cold nights mess with readings. I had heard that before. The fence came back a third time, not exactly the same angle, but close enough to twist my stomach. This time it was on the left. The wire sagged the same way. The posts leaned at the same tired angle. The pale rock was there again, now closer to the edge of the road. I knew I had not crossed to the other side. The road had not forked. There was nowhere to turn. I checked the dash clock. It still read around the same time. The glow felt too bright. I turned it down. The darkness outside pressed in harder. My headlights picked up movement again, farther out this time, up on the ridge. The shapes were taller than the fence posts, thin and vertical. They did not sway. They did not step. They stood like markers driven into the hill. As I slowed, the engine dipped and the gas needle slid faster, like something had tugged it down. I sped up again and felt a wash of relief when the needle climbed back, slow and unsure. My mouth was dry. I realized I had not seen another car since leaving Yakima. No taillights, no oncoming beams. The pull-offs were empty. One had an old tire lying flat like a dark coin. Another had a rusted sign with no face left on it. The road surface changed without warning, smooth to rough, then back again. Each change sent a shiver through the steering wheel. I focused on staying straight. I counted reflectors. I counted seconds between curves. The shapes on the hills appeared again, closer now, still not moving. When the road dipped, they vanished. When it rose, they returned, always at the edge of what my lights could reach. I told myself they were irrigation equipment, tall rigs left out after harvest. I had seen those during the day. At night, without context, they looked wrong. The gas gauge dropped again, faster this time, sliding past the quarter mark. I felt heat in my face. I had driven this distance before on less fuel. I checked for leaks in the mirror. Nothing trailed behind me. The smell inside the car did not change. The engine kept its rhythm. Only the needle misbehaved. The fence showed up one last time. Then the road began to slope down toward the river. The air changed, cooler and heavier. My headlights picked up a long line of posts running parallel to the road. Intact this time, no broken wire. The earlier fences fell into place in my head. Different properties, same materials, same age. At night, with fatigue dragging my thoughts into narrow channels, I had stitched them together into one thing. The shapes on the hills resolved as I got closer. Wind turbines stood in rows on the ridges, their blades still or moving too slow to catch its speed. From a distance, they looked like tall figures. Up close, they were just machines. The gas gauge climbed back toward a quarter as the slope evened out. I realized the road had been pulling uphill in long, shallow stretches I had not noticed. The engine had worked harder. The sensor had reacted late. The needle settled where it should have been all along. When I finally reached the interstate, the sudden spread of lights felt unreal. The lanes were wide and clean. Reflective signs glowed fresh. I merged without seeing another car and checked the dash clock out of habit. It read 12:09 a.m. For a moment, my head went light. I had been driving longer than that. I knew it. Then I remembered the battery warning that had flickered earlier when I hit a rough patch. The clock had reset when the voltage dipped. It had happened once before after a cold night start. I drove the last mile steady, the road familiar now, the fear draining out in pieces. By the time I parked in Ellensburg, the sky had a thin hint of gray at the edge. I sat with the engine off and listened to the ticking fade. Everything had an explanation when I laid it out straight. Fatigue had bent my sense of time. Repeating landmarks had folded into each other. Old equipment had stood still on the hills and waited for my headlights to give them shape. A faulty gauge had played with my nerves. None of it needed anything else to be true. I went inside and slept hard. The next day, in daylight, I drove part of the route back. The fences were all there, different and ordinary. The turbines turned slow against a clear sky. The road was just a road again. I have not taken it at night since. In February 2021, I was driving east through northern Nevada after leaving the hospital where my father had been staying. He had been sick for a long time, the kind of sickness that drains weight and color, and I stayed longer than planned because I could not leave him alone. By the time I finally left, I had already been awake for more than 20 hours. I wanted to get home before the next storm closed the pass, so I chose the long empty stretch instead of the interstate. It was just past 3 in the morning. Snow blew sideways across the road, thin and sharp, the kind that skitters instead of falling. The highway felt abandoned. No headlights came from either direction. My radio faded in and out until it gave up and went silent. Cell service had dropped an hour earlier. The world outside my windshield was reduced to gray shapes and white streaks. Every mile marker felt like progress counted by effort. I kept my hands tight on the wheel because the wind pushed at the car without warning, sliding it just enough to keep me alert. Fatigue came in waves. I chewed stale gum, cracked the window, adjusted my seat. I told myself I would stop at the next rest area, splash water on my face, and keep moving. When the exit sign appeared, it did not list a name. It just showed the rest area symbol. I slowed and took it because I needed a break more than I needed certainty. The road curved away from the highway and dipped into a shallow basin. Snow piled deeper there. The rest area lights glowed ahead, bright and steady, casting long shadows across the lot. I remember thinking it looked newer than most places out there, cleaner, almost out of place. There were no other cars. The building sat back from the lot, low and square, with glass doors that reflected the lights like black mirrors. I parked close to the entrance and left the engine running. Snow tapped against the hood and roof. I stepped out and felt the cold cut through my jacket. The doors were locked. A small sign said closed for the season. The lights inside were on anyway. I could see empty counters and a row of sinks through the glass. No movement, no sound. I tried the doors once more, then went back to my car. I did not feel afraid then, just tired. I leaned my seat back and let the heat run. I pulled out my phone and opened a map, more out of habit than hope. The rest area did not show. The road I had taken off the highway appeared, but the place itself was missing, like it did not exist. I zoomed in and out. Nothing changed. I scrolled through messages from earlier that night, checking the timestamps. My eyes burned. Snow thickened and swirled under the lights. I was thinking about my father, about how small he looked in the bed, when a sharp knock hit the rear window. It was a solid sound, close and sudden, not like snow or wind. My whole body tightened. I dropped the phone and twisted in my seat. The back window was covered in frost and snow, but I could see no shape, no shadow. My heart hammered fast and loud, the way it does when the body reacts before the mind can catch up. I waited, holding my breath, listening. The wind pushed snow across the lot. The engine hummed. Nothing else moved. I told myself it was ice sliding off the roof, or something blown loose by the gusts. I reached for the door lock and checked it even though I knew it was already locked. The second knock came harder, right where my shoulder blades would have been if I were sitting upright. The glass shuddered. I flinched forward. My stomach dropped, heavy and cold. I turned again, slower this time, forcing myself to look. Still nothing. Before I could settle, the sound shifted. A knock landed on the driver's side window, closer to my face, firm and deliberate. The glass vibrated. I snapped my head toward it, expecting to see a hand, a sleeve, a face pressed close. The window showed only falling snow and the empty lot beyond. No movement, no footsteps, no person. I scanned the mirrors front and back. The lot was bare. The building stood silent. The light poles buzzed faintly. Snow covered the ground smooth and pale, with no tracks anywhere near my car. I sat frozen, every sense sharpened. My pulse thudded in my ears. I waited for another knock, but none came. After a long moment, my body started to shake, not from cold but from the release of tension. I reached for the phone again and gripped it too hard. No signal. I tried the emergency call anyway. It did not connect. As I was deciding whether to drive away or stay put, a chime sounded on the dash. A warning light appeared, bright and yellow, tire pressure low. I stared at it, confused. The car had been fine when I pulled in. I had not hit anything. The cold could lower pressure, but the timing felt wrong. I looked out at the tires. Snow clung to the wheel wells, but from where I sat they looked intact. I did not get out to check. I did not want to open the door. I shifted into drive and eased forward. The tires rolled without resistance. No thumping, no pull. I circled the lot once, slow and cautious, scanning every corner. Still no one. As I headed toward the exit, my headlights swept across the snow near the building. That was when I saw the footprints. They started near the back of my car. Deep impressions, clear and sharp, leading away at a slight angle. The pattern looked normal, heel to toe, evenly spaced. They crossed the lot toward the building, then stopped. Not faded, not covered. They ended in the middle of the open space, as if whoever made them had vanished. I stopped the car and stared, my hands numb on the wheel. I counted the prints. 6 steps, 7, 8, then nothing. Beyond that point, the snow was untouched. I did not sit there long. I drove out of the rest area and back onto the highway, picking up speed as soon as the road allowed. The warning light stayed on. The snow thinned as I climbed out of the basin. I did not stop again until dawn. At a truck stop an hour later, I pulled under the lights and got out. The cold felt less sharp there, dulled by exhaust and noise. I checked the tires. The rear right one was low. A small screw was lodged near the edge, buried just enough to leak slowly. The others were fine. I filled the tire with air and watched the pressure rise. It held. I stood there longer than needed, replaying the rest area in my head, trying to fit the pieces together. The screw could have been there before. The cold could have made the pressure drop fast enough to trigger the warning at that moment. The footprints could have been from a maintenance worker who walked out earlier and then left by a path I could not see from my angle. The knocking could have been ice, or snow packed by the wind, or something loose hitting the glass. But the details did not line up cleanly. The prints began too close to my car. The knocks were too placed, too solid, too intentional. The lights being on in a locked building made no sense for a closed rest area. The place not appearing on the map bothered me more than I wanted to admit. Later, when I looked it up, I found a brief mention of the site in an old transportation report. It had been shut down years earlier due to structural issues. The lights were left on to deter vandalism until power was cut completely. That never happened because the area was remote and low priority. There had been reports of people using the place as shelter during storms. Drifters, stranded drivers, maintenance crews passing through. Foot traffic that came and went without record. The report noted occasional complaints of harassment, knocks on vehicles, attempts to get attention late at night. No injuries, no follow-up. I saved the document and closed it. The explanation was enough. Person had been there. Someone moving quietly in the snow, avoiding the light, testing doors, checking cars. They had knocked, maybe to see if I was asleep, maybe to scare me off. When I moved, they stepped away, backtracking along their own prints until they reached a spot where wind had scoured the surface clean, erasing the rest. I tell myself that now. It fits. It stays within reason. Still, when I drive at night and see lights where they should not be, I keep going. I do not stop at places that feel forgotten. And when snow hits my windows just right, I remember how it sounded, and how empty the lot looked when I turned and saw nothing there. It was the summer of 2016, late enough that the heat still clung to everything even after dark. A bonfire had burned down to glowing coals by the time we decided to leave. Smoke soaked into my clothes and hair, mixing with the smell of pine and spilled beer. I remember feeling slow and loose, not drunk, just worn down from standing too long and breathing smoke. Just before midnight, the 3 of us climbed into my friend's old sedan, the one with the cracked dashboard and a trunk that never quite closed right. I took the back seat. The car smelled like old fabric and dust baked by years of sun. When the engine turned over, it rattled for a second before settling into a rough idle. We pulled away from the clearing and followed a narrow road that cut off the longer paved route back to town. It was supposed to save time. Someone at the fire had mentioned it, said it used to be a service road for logging trucks decades ago, before the mill shut down and the forest reclaimed most of it. The headlights carved out a short tunnel of visibility. The road was packed dirt with loose gravel, pale and dry, reflecting the light in uneven patches. Trees pressed in on both sides, tall and straight, their lower branches long gone. The forest felt closer than it should have, like the road had been carved too narrow and never widened. Limbs leaned inward, and brush crowded the edges, brushing the sides of the car now and then with a soft scrape. The GPS glowed on the dash, a calm blue line twisting through the dark. At first it felt normal. The car rolled forward, tires crunching, engine humming steady. Then I noticed the map kept shifting. The arrow moved, but the distance to the next turn stayed the same. Every few seconds, the screen refreshed and recalculated, as if unsure where we were. It showed us moving, but never getting closer to the end. No one commented on it. I stared past the driver's head, watching the trees slide by, trying to judge speed by the rhythm of the gravel. The air through the open window was warm and smelled damp despite the dry road. Insects struck the windshield with dull taps. The road dipped and rose, shallow curves bending out of sight, then reappearing the same way. Time stretched. The GPS recalculated again. The progress bar did not change. I leaned forward slightly to get a better look, then settled back. The forest seemed thicker now, darker between the trunks. Headlights barely reached 10 feet off the road before being swallowed by black. The sense of being watched crept in slowly, without a clear starting point. It came from how close everything felt. The trees were too near, the brush too tall, the road too quiet. Even the engine noise sounded muted, as if the sound was being absorbed by the woods. Then something moved at the edge of the light. At first it was just a blur, low and fast, keeping pace with the car. My brain tried to label it before I fully processed what I was seeing. It ran alongside us, just beyond the reach of the headlights, where light fell off into shadow. Whatever it was stayed parallel, matching speed without effort. I held my breath without realizing it. The shape stayed level with the back door, then drifted closer, entering the edge of the beam. I could make out motion more than form. Long movement, smooth and steady. It did not stumble on the uneven ground. It did not make a sound. No snapping branches, no rustle, no heavy breathing. I leaned closer to the window, my hand tightening around the door handle. The thing stayed with us for several seconds, maybe longer. It felt longer because my mind refused to fill in details. It could have been an animal, a deer or a large dog, running on packed dirt and pine needles that swallowed sound. It could have been a person, someone moving fast through terrain they knew well, wearing dark clothes that blended into the night. What made it worse was the silence. No one reacted. No sharp inhale, no shift in posture, no sudden movement from the front seats. The car kept rolling at the same speed. The headlights stayed fixed ahead. The engine never changed pitch. The shape dropped back and vanished into the dark as quickly as it had appeared. The trees closed in again. The road continued like nothing had happened. I realized then that all three of us had seen it. I knew because of the way the air in the car changed, the tension pulling tight without a word. The shared silence felt deliberate, as if acknowledging it would give it more weight than any of us wanted to carry. The GPS recalculated again. The screen flickered, then showed the same stretch of road looping in a loose curve. The distance to pavement stayed unchanged. The forest road kept going. Minutes passed. Sweat trickled down my back despite the open window. I watched the side mirror, half expecting movement to return, but nothing followed. Only darkness and the faint glow of our own lights. Eventually, the dirt gave way to a strip of broken asphalt. The transition came suddenly, the tires humming instead of crunching. The trees thinned, pulling back from the road as if releasing us. Ahead, a real highway sign reflected back, bright and solid. As soon as the car rolled onto the pavement, the radio crackled to life. The volume knob had not been touched. Static burst out, followed by a clear automated tone. The sound filled the car, sharp and out of place. Then a recorded voice began listing severe weather conditions, naming counties and warnings that made no sense for the night we were in. The date embedded in the alert scrolled across the display. It was from 3 years earlier. I stared at the radio, my skin prickling. The alert played through in full, uninterrupted, then ended with a long tone before cutting back to silence. The display froze for a moment, then went dark. No one reached for the controls. The car stayed steady on the road. Streetlights appeared ahead, distant and reassuring. Later, after we were back in town and the night had lost its edge, I tried to break the experience down into pieces that made sense. The service road was old and poorly mapped. GPS systems often struggled with roads that no longer officially existed, bouncing signals off tree cover and outdated data. That explained the recalculating and the lack of progress. The running shape could have been a deer, spooked by headlights, choosing to flee along the path of least resistance instead of cutting through brush. On soft ground, with enough distance, sound could vanish. Adrenaline could stretch seconds into something heavier. The radio alert bothered me the most until I looked into it. Older car radios stored emergency alerts in internal memory. If the battery voltage dipped or surged, stored data could replay on startup or when the system reset. Hitting pavement after miles of vibration could have jolted a loose connection. The date stamp meant it was cached, not live. None of the explanations felt perfect on their own, but together they held. They formed a line from start to finish that stayed within reason. Still, when I think back on that drive, what stays with me is not fear in the moment, but the discipline of silence. 3 people saw the same thing and chose not to name it. The forest let us pass. The road ended, and we never took that shortcut again. I was in South Dakota on a short work assignment in November of 2019, the kind that pays well but keeps you moving without letting you settle. I had spent the day on site, then stayed late organizing reports because the deadline had been moved up. By the time I left Rapid City, it was already after 2 in the morning. I rented an SUV because the company required it for winter travel, even though the forecast was clear and dry that night. I chose the scenic route through the Badlands because it was empty and direct. I had driven enough highways that week and wanted a road where I could stay alert without fighting traffic. The temperature hovered just above freezing. The sky was clear, stars sharp and cold, scattered across a wide black ceiling. There was no moon, which made the land feel deeper, carved out by darkness instead of light. The Badlands at night do not look like they do in daylight. The shapes lose definition. The ridges and cuts flatten into layered shadows. My headlights reached forward and dropped off fast, eaten by the terrain. The road twisted gently, rising and falling without warning. Every turn felt older than the map, like the pavement had been poured to follow the land rather than change it. I kept the speed steady and the radio off. The SUV was quiet, too quiet for a rental, with a smooth hum that almost faded into the background. The dash glowed soft white and blue. My phone sat dark in the console with no signal. I did not miss it. About 20 minutes in, as the road climbed along a ridge, my headlights swept across a higher slope to the right. That was when I saw the reflection. 2 points of light appeared on the ridge above the road. They were not bright like reflectors on a post, but sharp, clean pinpoints, spaced evenly apart. They reflected back directly into the headlights, steady and focused. At first, I assumed they were animals. Deer eyes catch light easily, and the Badlands are full of wildlife. But these were too high. They sat well above where a deer's head would be, even on uneven ground. I checked my angle and the slope again, then adjusted my seat slightly, trying to change perspective. The lights stayed where they were. As I drove forward, the road curved left. The ridge followed. The lights moved with me. They did not bob or sway. They did not rise or fall with the land. They stayed level, keeping the same distance and height, as if fixed to something moving parallel to the road. I slowed slightly, then sped up. The lights kept pace, matching without effort. My hands tightened on the wheel. My breathing stayed controlled, slow and shallow. I told myself it was a trick of angle and motion, something reflective mounted on equipment or fencing farther back than I could judge in the dark. The Badlands had old infrastructure scattered through them, survey markers, warning reflectors, remnants of past projects. The problem was that reflectors do not move. The lights shifted when I shifted. When I slowed, they slowed. When I accelerated, they stayed exactly where they were relative to my position. I tested it carefully, easing the speed up by 10, then dropping it again. The SUV responded. The lights did not drift or lag. The road straightened. The ridge stayed alongside me. The lights stayed locked in place. I felt exposed, like I was being measured. The silence inside the car grew heavier. The hum of the engine suddenly too loud, too present. I kept my eyes forward but tracked the lights with my peripheral vision, afraid that looking directly at them for too long would sharpen details I did not want. After another mile, the terrain dipped and the ridge fell away. The lights vanished behind a cut in the land. I let out a breath I had been holding and focused back on the road. My shoulders ached from tension. Then the ridge rose again on the opposite side. The lights returned, same height, same spacing, same distance. They appeared instantly without transition, as if they had been waiting just out of view. This time, I felt the fear settle deeper, slower. It was not panic. It was the awareness that whatever explanation I chose had to account for consistency. Animals move unpredictably. Reflections shift with angle. These did neither. I glanced at the speedometer again and made a sharper change, pushing faster than felt comfortable on the winding road. The SUV surged forward. The lights stayed even. I slowed abruptly. They slowed. I tested the brakes lightly, enough to feel the nose dip. The lights dipped exactly the same amount. The ridge ended again, and the road dropped into a shallow valley. This time, the lights stayed visible longer, cresting above the edge of the land before finally slipping out of sight. That was when the engine warning light came on. It blinked once, then stayed solid. A bright amber symbol on the dash that did not belong there. The engine tone did not change. The SUV did not shudder or lose power. Everything felt normal except the light. I eased off the accelerator and scanned the gauges. Temperature normal. Oil pressure fine. No other alerts. I looked back toward the ridge without thinking. The lights were gone. Not hidden. Not dimmed. Gone. The slope beside the road was empty. A smooth, dark outline against the sky. No reflection. No movement. Nothing. I kept driving, slower now, alert for any change in the engine. The warning light stayed on for another minute, then turned off by itself. The dash returned to its neutral glow. The rest of the drive passed without incident. The road eventually flattened and merged into a more traveled highway. Distant lights appeared, scattered and human. My body slowly released its grip on the moment, tension draining into a dull fatigue. When I returned the SUV 2 days later, I mentioned the warning light as part of the routine report. The attendant logged it and told me they would check the system. I signed the paperwork and did not think much about it until I received an email the following week. The rental company had reviewed the vehicle diagnostics and driving logs. The warning light had not been recorded. More than that, the system showed no record of the drive through the Badlands at all. According to the data, the SUV had left Rapid City and arrived at my hotel by a different route, one that added time and distance but stayed on major roads. I checked my expense report. The mileage I logged matched the scenic route. The fuel usage matched it too. The timestamps aligned with my memory. The vehicle's internal GPS and telemetry did not. I followed up, assuming it was a data gap caused by poor signal. That explanation held. Large sections of the Badlands have no coverage. If the system lost connection and failed to cache the route locally, it would default to the last known path once signal returned. The diagnostic report would show a clean line instead of the actual drive. The engine warning light could have been triggered by a momentary sensor fault, something small that corrected itself before logging. Rentals see that kind of thing often. As for the lights, I went back through satellite images and topographic maps. The ridgeline ran close to the road in several places. There were old survey markers along the top, some mounted on tall posts to stay visible over snow drifts. Certain materials reflect headlights intensely at night, especially when aligned just right. If multiple markers sat in a row, their reflections could appear paired from a distance. If I had been driving parallel to them, maintaining a similar speed, the illusion of pacing could have held longer than expected. The height would make sense. The steadiness would too. All of it fit piece by piece. Still, when I think about that drive, I remember how precise the lights were, how they held position without drift, how they vanished the moment something changed inside the car. I remember the way the Badlands felt closed in despite the open sky, how the road seemed carved for solitude. I have driven many empty roads since then. I choose the direct routes now, and when my headlights catch reflections at a height that feels wrong, I do not test them. I keep my speed steady, my eyes forward, and I let the road end on its own terms. We were driving through the Appalachian back roads in late fall of 2014, close to midnight, trying to reach a rental cabin we had booked for a long weekend. The three of us had left later than planned after work, telling ourselves the drive would be quiet and easy. The map showed a thin line of county roads cutting through hills and forest. Nothing unusual, just slower than the highway. By the time we were deep into it, the clock on the dash read 11:50 p.m. Fog had settled into the valley's hours earlier. It was not the light kind that drifts and thins. It sat low and dense, heavy enough to swallow the reach of the headlights. The beams did not stretch forward so much as flatten against a wall of gray, lighting only what was directly in front of the hood. Beyond that, the road felt like it dropped into nothing. The trees pressed in tight on both sides, bare branches arching overhead like ribs. Fallen leaves clung to the pavement, damp and dark. The road twisted constantly, climbing and dipping without warning. Every curve felt sharper because we could not see past it. The forest absorbed sound. Even the engine noise seemed muted, like the air itself was thick. We were all quiet, focused on the road. The heater ran low, just enough to keep the windshield clear. The air inside the car was dry and warm, smelling faintly of coffee and the plastic of the dashboard. Outside, everything looked soaked, though it had not rained that night. The cabin was supposed to be another 20 minutes in, according to the directions we printed earlier. There was no signal out there. The phone screen stayed dark except for the faint glow of the time. We rounded a shallow bend when something crossed the road ahead of us. Came out of the fog on the left, already upright, moving fast but controlled. For a brief second, the headlights caught it full on. It was on two legs, arms tight to its sides, posture hunched forward like it was mid-stride. It crossed the pavement in 3 quick steps. Then it dropped down, not collapsed, dropped like it chose to. Its upper body folded forward and it disappeared into the trees on the right, swallowed by brush and shadow before the headlights could follow. The image burned into my mind because of what it did not have. There was no fur catching the light, no tail trailing behind, no bulk where shoulders should have been if it were a bear. What reflected back was smooth, pale, and brief. Skin, not hair, just enough to register before it was gone. I hit the brakes harder than I meant to. The car slowed, tires whispering over wet leaves. We stopped in the road, engine idling, headlights fixed on empty fog. No sound came from the trees. No movement followed. The forest went back to stillness like nothing had passed through it. None of us spoke. I did not need to look at the others to know we had all seen the same thing. The silence felt heavy, deliberate, like acknowledging it out loud would give it more weight than it deserved. After a few seconds, I eased the car forward again. Stopping felt worse than moving. The road continued to wind through the hills, fog thickening in pockets and thinning in others. Every curve felt watched. A few minutes later, I noticed the side windows looked hazy. At first I assumed it was from our breath, but when I reached up to wipe the glass, the inside was dry. The fog was on the outside only, clinging to the windows in uneven patches. The windshield stayed clear where the defroster blew, but the side glass clouded over, milky and opaque. I turned the fan higher. The inside air warmed further, but the fog on the outside thickened instead of thinning. Moisture beaded and smeared across the glass, as if the car had been dipped into a colder layer of air. The mirrors became useless. The world beyond the side windows vanished into white blur. I focused on the narrow strip of road ahead, headlights barely cutting through. The fog did not behave evenly. It rolled in waves, pooling in low spots, then lifting just enough to show tree trunks sliding past inches from the road. In some stretches, it felt like we were driving through a tunnel carved out of nothing. My hands stayed tight on the wheel. Every shape ahead looked like it could move. Fallen branches, fence posts, road signs appeared suddenly and vanished just as fast. The cabin turnoff finally appeared as a small reflective marker almost lost in the fog. I slowed and turned onto a gravel drive that climbed uphill away from the road. The trees thinned slightly, replaced by a clearing just big enough to hold the cabin. It sat dark against the forest, a simple wooden structure with a small porch and a single window reflecting our headlights. No other lights nearby, no neighboring cabins visible. The fog wrapped around the clearing, drifting slow and low. We parked and shut off the engine. The sudden silence felt too complete. The fog clung to the car, thick on the windows, droplets running down the glass from the outside only. We moved quickly, unloading bags and unlocking the door. The cabin smelled like old wood and dust, cold from being unoccupied. We turned on the lights and locked the door behind us without discussion. Inside, the air was dry. The windows remained fogged from the outside, opaque enough that the porch light showed only a dull glow through them. I checked the glass with my hand. Dry inside, cold outside. We did a quick walk through, checking rooms and corners, more out of instinct than fear. Nothing was disturbed. No signs of recent use beyond what the rental company had left. Sleep did not come easily. Every sound outside felt closer than it should have. Branches scraped the roof. Something small moved through leaves near the porch. Wind pushed fog against the walls in slow breaths. By morning, the fog was gone. Sunlight poured through the trees, revealing a steep slope behind the cabin and dense woods beyond it. The gravel drive connected to a narrow footpath that cut into the forest. It was faint but used, pressed down by repeated travel. We walked part of it, careful and alert. About 30 yards in, the path widened slightly near a cluster of trees. The ground there was torn up, leaves scattered, dirt exposed. Fresh boot prints cut across the path and disappeared downhill toward the road. They were human. Large boots, heavy tread, worn unevenly. Someone had crossed there recently, likely the night before, moving fast enough to scuff the ground where they changed direction. Farther down, near the edge of the slope, the undergrowth was crushed low, as if someone had dropped down into it deliberately, using their hands to steady themselves before moving on. It fit the movement we had seen. A person cutting across the road, realizing a car was coming faster than expected, choosing to drop low and vanish instead of being fully exposed in the headlights. In the fog, skin reflects differently than fur. Wet clothing clings and shines in strange ways. Distance and fear fill in the rest. Later, after we left, I looked into the area more. That stretch of road was used by locals who lived deeper in the hills, some without vehicles, some avoiding attention. Hunters moved through at night to reach private land before dawn. Trespassers cut through woods instead of risking encounters on the road. The fog explanation was simpler than it felt at the time. A temperature inversion had settled into the valleys that night. Cold, wet air sat low, while warmer air stayed just above it. The car moved through layers, causing condensation to form on the cold outer glass, while the interior stayed warm and dry. Side windows fog more easily than windshields, especially without direct airflow. Everything had a reason. Still, when I think back to that night, I remember how quickly something crossed our path and disappeared, how the fog closed in after it, how the windows clouded as if the outside world was sealing itself off. I remember the certainty that we were not alone out there, and how the forest took something back the moment we saw too much of it. I left my friend's house sometime around 2:45 in the morning in 2017, still carrying the weight of the argument in my chest. It had not been loud or dramatic, just sharp enough to leave a residue, the kind of disagreement that makes every word afterward feel wrong. I remember walking out without looking back, getting into my car with hands that felt clumsy and tense. I did not calm down before starting the engine. I wanted distance more than sense. The road I took was not one I knew well. It was a rural stretch that cut between small towns, the kind of road locals use without thinking and outsiders only take when they want to avoid traffic. No shoulder in places, shallow ditches filled with dead grass, fences running parallel to the pavement for long distances. Trees leaned inward from both sides, their branches forming loose arches that caught moonlight in uneven patches. I drove faster than I should have. The speed felt justified at the time, like motion itself could burn off the anger. The engine responded smoothly, the tires humming louder as the pavement blurred beneath me. My headlights carved out a narrow tunnel, yellowed by age and dust. Beyond that, the world fell away into shadow. A few miles out, after the houses thinned and the road settled into a long straight line, I noticed the sound. At first it blended into my own engine noise, a low rumble that felt almost imagined. I adjusted my speed slightly, listening. The sound stayed. It was deeper than my car's engine. Slower, heavier. The kind of noise made by a larger vehicle, something with weight behind it. I checked the rearview mirror. Darkness. No headlights. No reflection. Just the faint glow of my own lights fading into black. I eased off the gas. My speed dropped. The sound behind me dropped with it. I pressed the accelerator again, testing it. The rumble rose, matching me. Still no lights. The road curved gently left, then right. I watched the mirror carefully through each bend, expecting headlights to swing into view, but nothing appeared. The sound stayed steady, just far enough back to feel deliberate. My anger drained away, replaced by a tight focus. I adjusted my grip on the wheel, feeling the texture worn smooth by years of use. My mouth went dry. I told myself it was another car with headlights off, maybe someone who did not realize or did not care. Rural roads attract that kind of driver. I slowed again, more sharply this time. The rumble slowed too, closing the distance slightly but never enough to reveal a shape. The sound felt closer now, vibrating faintly through the car's frame. I sped up harder than before, pushing past a speed that felt safe for the narrow road. The engine climbed. Wind noise increased. The rumble stayed right behind me, neither gaining nor falling back. There was no variation, no mistake. Whatever was behind me adjusted with precision. The trees along the road grew thicker. The ditches deepened. I scanned ahead for any sign of an intersection or driveway where I could turn off. But the road stayed empty. No mailboxes, no reflectors, just pavement and darkness. My heart rate climbed. I felt heat build under my collar despite the cool night air. I cracked the window slightly, hoping to hear more, to confirm what I was dealing with. The sound flooded in immediately, louder now, unmistakable. A truck engine. Diesel by the cadence of it. Big enough to carry momentum without effort. Still no lights. I thought about stopping and letting it pass, but the idea tightened something in my stomach. I did not want to be stationary. I did not want to give whatever was behind me control of the situation. After several more miles, a dim orange glow appeared ahead. A streetlight, isolated, casting a weak circle of light onto cracked pavement. A closed gas station sat beneath it, windows dark, pumps wrapped in plastic. The lot was empty, weeds pushing through the seams in the concrete. I slowed as I approached, my turn signal clicking loudly in the quiet. I pulled into the lot and stopped directly under the streetlight, the harsh glow flattening everything around me. The sound behind me cut off instantly. No fading, no retreat. It stopped as if someone had turned a switch. I sat frozen, hands locked on the wheel, listening. The night pressed in, silent except for the ticking of my cooling engine. I watched the road through the windshield and mirrors, waiting for movement, light, anything. Nothing came. After a full minute, I opened the door and stepped out. The air felt cooler than before, heavy with the smell of wet asphalt and old fuel. The streetlight buzzed overhead, its light flickering slightly. The gas station windows reflected my car and nothing else. I walked around to the back, my footsteps loud in the stillness. That was when I saw the tire marks. 2 dark tracks cut into the thin layer of dust and grit on the pavement behind my car. They ran straight, close together, deep and clear. They stopped just a few feet from my rear bumper. There were no marks leading away. The tracks did not curve. They did not fade. They ended as cleanly as the sound had stopped. I crouched down, my knees stiff, and studied them closely. The pattern was wide, consistent with a large truck. The tread was sharp, not worn smooth, fresh. I stood and scanned the lot again. No other tracks crossed them. No footprints. No sign of a turn or acceleration. Just the 2 lines, ending behind me like someone had braked hard and vanished. I got back into my car and locked the doors, my hands shaking now. I started the engine and pulled forward slowly, watching the marks disappear beneath my tires. I did not stop again until I reached a main road with traffic and light. The explanation came together over the next few days, piece by piece, after the adrenaline wore off and reason returned. The road I had been on was used by farm equipment and fuel delivery trucks servicing remote tanks and generators. Many of those trucks ran without headlights on private stretches to avoid spooking livestock or because the drivers knew the road well enough to rely on ambient light. Some older diesel engines are quiet at idle but carry sound far under load, especially at night when air is still. The truck had likely been following at a distance, unintentionally matching my speed because I was driving at a steady pace for long stretches. When I slowed or sped up, the driver adjusted out of habit, not intent. My heightened state turned coincidence into pursuit. When I turned into the gas station, the driver likely braked hard to avoid following me into a lit area or private property. Stopping just short before turning off onto a side road or dirt access I could not see from my angle. On dusty pavement, hard braking can leave deep marks that appear to end abruptly, especially if the vehicle turns sharply afterward. Under stress, my mind filled in gaps with fear. The absence of headlights made the presence feel deliberate. The silence after stopping felt unnatural because I expected continuation. Knowing all that does not erase the memory. I still remember the sound staying with me no matter what I did. The way it felt measured, patient. I remember the marks behind my car, stopping too close for comfort. And I remember how fast anger gave way to something colder once I realized I was not alone on that road. I drive slower now when I am tired or upset. I take roads I know, and when I hear an engine behind me with no lights to match it, I do not test it. I let distance do the work instead.